Hi everyone, my name is Ngige. I'm the founder and CEO of Stealth Africa Consulting LLP, a forensic firm headquartered here in Nairobi but working across the African continent. We provide boutique and specialized forensic services. This week is a very exciting week because it's the Fraud Awareness Week that is run by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the world leading body in anti-fraud matters. And the purpose of the Fraud Awareness Week is just to ensure that there is a lot of awareness around fraud. First, what is fraud? We need to raise the awareness about what fraud really is. One of the key things that differentiate fraud from certain types of irregularities and unethical conduct, such as theft, is the concealment aspect of it, right? So fraud is a deliberate act of deception intended for personal or financial gain, typically at the expense of an individual or an organization, and it often involves manipulating, concealing, and misrepresenting information. Now, that means that fraud is much difficult to identify and to pick compared to, say, theft. For example, if you walked in a room and money has been placed on the table and someone picks that money and goes away with it, if someone else comes in, they'll immediately notice that the money is missing. However, if information and documents are prepared to show that that money was placed in a bank account and had been banked and a fake bank statement provided, one will feel more confident that the money is still there, only that it is no longer physical, it has been banked. That is how fraud happens. Fraud has been on the rise since the after COVID-19 because of certain changes that have taken place. For instance, work from home arrangements. Working from home creates certain exposures and has made certain traditional controls not to be able to work. For instance, access control, weak internet access and online access, issues of impersonation with remote work environments, all those kind of things, and also the migration from physical cash to more electronic cash, which has increased phenomenally. All those things have amplified fraud. We need to understand that because concealment is a major fraud element, we need to figure out how do we improve detection of concealment methods. So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners publishes the Report to the Nations, which is an annual survey of anti-fraud professionals like myself to pick what are the key things in fraud. And one of the biggest concealment methods is creating fake documents. One of the things we do at Stealth Africa is something called questioned document examination. We have a lab here in Nairobi where we can check fake handwritings, signatures, fake documents, including with tools that are advanced that can look at things such as paper aging, and certain unique features in documents, including revealing indentations using infrared, ultraviolet lighting and all that. So those tools become very critical, that our staff are not just trained on basic document examination, but there are advanced tools behind that where we can be able to detect fraud. We've been able to uncover a lot of fraud through bringing some of these scientific methods to reveal concealment, for instance, when you are doing forensic investigation into procurement fraud. To win the war on fraud, we need to be able to break the fraud triangle. We all know that the fraud triangle brings together the elements that make fraud possible. So for instance, opportunity, pressure, and rationalization. Those are the elements of the fraud triangle. Most focus area by most of us is in the area of opportunity, which means removing the opportunity for fraud to take place by implementing controls in place. But these two other elements are mostly ignored when you are trying to build a strong internal control environment. For instance, pressure. Pressure is real or perceived. comes from people believing that they've got certain pressures and needs. And also there's organizational pressure, for instance, and realistic performance targets. Those housekeeping issues are very important to be able to deal with, and creating programs that enable our staff at the office to be able to take the pressure off. For instance, a HR department can come up with, say, ways in which staff can live within their means by being taken through personal financial management training. These kind of trainings can help staff live within their means and so forth without feeling the pressure to show a lifestyle that is not theirs. Things like addiction, debt, create pressures that drive people towards committing fraud. The other element that is most often ignored is rationalization. Rationalization is when someone convinces themselves that they are doing the right thing through stating, like, for instance, I deserve this, I'll pay it back. Rationalization is something that needs to be dealt with by creating, for example, systems that uphold organizational justice. For instance, a fair performance review process and reward process. If people are being paid bonuses, it should be based on merit and clear ways in which they are able to access those benefits. What that does is it takes away ways in which people rationalize to convince themselves they're doing the right thing. In one of the cases we did, someone decided to pay themselves a bonus because they had not been paid a bonus despite others being paid a bonus and they had performed less than they did. So to deal with fraud, we have to break the fraud triangle. And breaking the fraud triangle, you have to go beyond just implementing strong controls. Of course, strong controls are important, but we all know that in fraud, there's a lot of collusion as well. Collusion is another element that has emerged. One of the other aspects I want to talk about is the issue of fraud being a multi-stage scheme. These days, fraud is not just one scheme. So there is, for instance, the SCFE fraud tree, where you have got asset misappropriation, financial statements fraud, and corruption. But fraud now involves several stages. For instance, people creating fictitious accounts in a bank, an insider providing access or a backdoor to it, system breaches, fictitious transactions created, and third parties creating exfiltration points where funds are exfiltrated out. It means that we need to be alive to the various multifaceted way in which fraud happens today. Fraud has significantly evolved from back in the day when you'd have only check fraud, where someone would create a fake check and all that. So a lot of things have changed and we need to be alive to it. And what that means is you have to create a multi-layered defense mechanism using the 3 lines of defense. What are the 3 lines of defense? Ladies and gentlemen, 3 lines of defense is a way in which the organization is put together to create layers that can be able to pick irregularities. The first line of defense is business operations. These are people in the day-to-day operations of an organization. The second line of defense is, say, risk management or compliance. These are the people who monitor the first line of defense. And then the third line of defense, which is a robust internal audit that looks at all other lines of defense. If something is not picked in the first line, it should be picked on the second. If it's not picked on the second, it should be picked on the third line of defense. One of the new things that have evolved that I want to talk about that we've seen in a lot of cases we are doing is the rise of insider fraud. We recently published the mobile money fraud paper commissioned by GSMA, the World Association of Telco Companies. And in this paper that was published earlier this year, 2024, is that we were able to highlight that insider fraud is on the rise. What is insider fraud? Insider fraud is a type of fraud or threat that comes from the inside. A current or former employee, contractor, or business partner that can carry out fraudulent schemes by taking advantage of knowledge, skill, experience, and access unique to an insider. The pervasive nature in which insider fraud happens and how it leads to breakdown of controls means that we need to up our game in the way we are fighting fraud. Everyone should become someone who is looking out to ensure that fraud doesn't take place. It's everyone's responsibility. It's no longer the work of the fraud management team, risk management team, HR, or any of the others, what we call gatekeeper functions in a company. Right? So while the report to the nations has highlighted that tips is the highest method in which detection happens, we need to change from that, because if you look further, when you detect through tips, the losses are higher and it's 12 months later on average when it's paid. How we need to move is to be more proactive, things like monitoring, controls, reconciliations, basic things like that in the day-to-day task that will ensure that fraud is detected early before the losses build up, and we are on the lookout for our fellow colleagues to make sure that they are doing the right thing in the organization. So I wanted to speak about insider fraud because it's growing. The trend shows that it is growing phenomenally. Right? So in summary, I would like to say that we need to remember, one, it's everyone's responsibility to fight fraud. Two, stay informed. It's a week of fraud awareness. Please be informed about what's going on, what are the latest trends, and how can you work to protect your organization and protect yourself by doing the right thing. Practice vigilance. Be on the lookout. As an organization, also layer your controls in line with the lines of defense by creating multi-layered defense mechanisms. Encourage whistleblowing and support whistleblowing in the organization, and encourage continuous improvement. Thank you very much for your time and for watching this video. Please remember the things we've discussed and fight fraud in whichever place you are. Thank you very much.